I had just signed my hospital discharge papers with trembling hands. When I saw the divorce papers she'd left for me. A plain white envelope sat neatly on the table, next to a wilted bouquet. The handwriting, Clara's handwriting, my wife, made my heart pound. For a moment, I thought she came to take me home, to hold me in her arms, like she always did. But no. Inside the envelope wasn't a loving note. It was a cold piece of paper, stamped in red, with the words "Divorce Agreement" printed at the top. "I'm sorry. I'm not strong enough to stay. Please sign this so we can both be free." Free. My throat burned. Just hours ago, the doctor had looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're lucky. You made it through. But there's only about a 30% chance you'll fully recover." I smiled when I heard that. I thought I had been given a second chance. I thought I'd go back to the woman I love. But now, staring at the divorce papers, shaking in my hands, I realized I survived death, only to be killed in a crueler way by the very person I lived for. At the corner of the page, just below Clara's signature, was the name of a lawyer, someone I'd never even heard of. When did she plan this? While I was lying in that hospital bed? Or even before I got sick? I clenched the paper, my eyes stinging. 10 years of marriage flashed before me like a film played in reverse. Our bike rides along the beach. The nights she'd lie in my arms and whisper, "I'll never leave you." Now, that promise had turned to ashes. Was it because I was weak that she walked away? Or because I was dying, and she'd run out of patience? I don't know. All I know is this: if I have even the slightest chance to survive, I'll never kneel again for someone who abandoned me when I was at my weakest. The day I was saved was also the day my heart was destroyed. My name is Daniel. I'm 35. I've been a construction engineer for over 10 years, long enough to get used to standing for hours under the scorching sun, my hands calloused from swinging hammers, and the smell of cement clinging to my skin. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, if I endured enough, Clara, my wife, would be happy to stay by my side. We met back in college. Clara was the girl with the warm smile, the soft voice, and those bright eyes that could pull you in without warning. I was the opposite, quiet, scrawny, always hiding in a corner of the library behind thick engineering books. I never thought someone like her would even notice me. But Clara chose me, the man who had nothing but a sincere heart and 2 hands willing to do anything for her. 10 years ago, I proposed to Clara in a tiny rented apartment with a cheap ring I bought after saving 3 months' salary. I still remember how my voice shook that day, my words breaking apart. I can't promise you a life of wealth, but I can give you everything I have." Clara cried and hugged me tight. She whispered, "I don't need riches. I just need you." Back then, I believed we'd walk through life hand in hand, no matter how fierce the storms got. But sometimes, even the strongest belief is as fragile as thin paper. The early years of our marriage were calm. We didn't have much, but we were happy with the simplest joys. I'd leave for work at dawn and come home late at night, but whenever I walked through that door, Clara would be there waiting with a warm dinner. On weekends, we'd stroll through the park, hand in hand, dreaming about a little house with a bright garden. But slowly, things began to change. When I got promoted, work started swallowing me whole. I came home later, eating dinner alone outside, carefully opening the bedroom door so I wouldn't wake Clara. One night, I came home earlier than usual. The apartment was dark, the living room so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. On the kitchen counter sat a bowl of instant noodles, cold and untouched. Clara wasn't home. I grabbed my phone and texted, "Where are you? I'm home." Half an hour later, she replied flatly, "Having drinks with colleagues. Grab something to eat, okay?" I put the phone down and sat there, staring at the flickering lamp. Had I somehow become a stranger in my own home? Another night, I saw Clara standing in the kitchen, wearing a thin nightgown. There was a faint red mark on her neck, like something had rubbed against her skin. "What happened to your neck?" I asked. She froze for a split second, then pulled her collar up and forced a smile. "Oh, the neighbor's cat scratched me. That's all." I wanted to believe her, but something inside me began to crack. I tried to fix things. I started coming home earlier, learned how to cook, carefully prepared dinners like the ones she used to love. One night, I made lasagna, her so-called comfort food. When she walked in and saw the table, she just gave a faint smile and said, "You don't have to try so hard. I'm fine." That smile. It wasn't the smile I fell for. It was hollow, cold, and distant enough to make my chest tighten. Then one morning, as I stood on scaffolding inspecting the site, I suddenly felt dizzy. Cold sweat soaked my shirt. My hands trembled as I tried to grip the steel bar, but there was no strength left. My vision blurred, and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. Needles pierced my arms. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled my nose. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside me. The doctor walked in with a grave expression. "You have early-stage liver cancer. Luckily, we caught it soon. But you need treatment right away." I let out a dry laugh, burying the fear deep inside. The first thing that came to mind wasn't death. It was Clara. Would she be strong enough to stay with me through the darkest days? Or would she? I stopped myself from finishing that thought, but a faint, uneasy feeling crept into my chest, making my heart pound. I didn't know that while I was fighting for my life. She was already making a decision that would send me down the darkest path I'd ever walked. The days in the hospital felt longer than ever. 4 sterile white walls surrounded me. The sharp scent of antiseptic mixed with sweat, and the metallic taste of blood in my throat. The heart monitor beeped steadily, each sound reminding me I was still alive, though my heart was dying a little more every day. I thought, when Clara heard the news, she'd rush to my side. She'd grab my hand and say, "I'm here. We'll get through this together." But she didn't come. On the first day, I texted her. "I had to be admitted. The doctor said I need treatment right away. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." The message showed, "Read," 15 minutes later, but there was no reply. I told myself, maybe she's in shock. Maybe she needs time. But by nightfall, there was still no text, no call, nothing. On the second day, I called her. The phone rang 3 times before I heard hurried voices. Before I could say anything, a man's laughter echoed faintly. "What are you doing? Stop teasing me." Clara's laughter followed, soft and awkward. "I'll step out to take this call." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. A cold chill crawled up my spine and settled deep in my bones. I called again. Busy signal. 10 minutes later, a text came in. "Sorry, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back later." She never called back. On the third day, a friend visited. He brought a bag of fruit and said, "Clara asked me to drop this off. She said she's tied up with work and can't visit yet." Work? I frowned. Clara never mentioned any work trips. After he left, I asked the nurse to hand me my phone. I opened her Facebook. The newest photo sent my heart plunging into a dark abyss. Clara was smiling brightly, holding a glass of red wine. Beside her was a man I didn't know. His arm draped lightly over her shoulder. The caption read, "Change is necessary for true happiness." I stared at the screen, my head spinning. For a moment, I wished I had never woken up, to be spared from seeing this. I used to think the scariest thing in life was death, but now I realize there's something worse. Being betrayed by the one you love most, before you've even had a chance to die. The days that followed were a blur of chemo and physical therapy. Every time the pain ripped through me, I saw Clara's smile. But not for me. She was smiling at him. At night, I listened to the rain tapping on the window, the hospital room closing in on me like it wanted to swallow me whole. A week later, when I could finally sit up on my own, a nurse brought me a white envelope. "It's from your wife," she said softly. "She said she's in a hurry." The envelope sat on the table, next to a wilted bouquet, the water in the vase cloudy and stale. I picked it up. The sharp scent of fresh paper hit my nose. My hands shook. Inside was a single sheet of paper. At the top, divorce agreement. At the bottom, Clara's messy handwriting. "I'm sorry. I'm not strong enough to stay. Please sign it, so we can both be free." "Free?" I let out a laugh, but it came out twisted, caught in my throat. A hot tear rolled down my cheek, splashing onto the paper. Clara had chosen to leave me, at the very moment I was fighting for my life. I clenched the paper, my heart aching, as if someone had crushed it in their fist. 10 years of memories flooded back like a film played in reverse. The sleepless nights working overtime to pay off debts. The mornings I'd quietly place flowers on the table so she could wake up with a smile. Now, it was all gone. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. A cold voice echoed in my head. Maybe I was just a placeholder. When I was strong, she stayed. The moment I grew weak, she left. But then, another voice spoke up, deeper, stronger. "If I survive this, I'll never kneel again for someone who abandoned me when I was at my weakest." I didn't know it then, but that was the day I lost the woman I loved, and found something far more precious, a reason to start over. This time, without her. When I returned to the apartment, after 2 months of fighting for my life, I wasn't greeted by Clara's arms, but by the heavy stench of mold and a cold divorce paper lying on the table. I slid the key into the lock. The clicking sound echoed through the dark apartment. A draft of cold air brushed past, making the ceiling light tremble faintly. The air smelled of stale food and bleach, so thick it felt suffocating. The bouquet I'd bought for Clara the day before I was admitted still sat on the table. Its petals were shriveled, leaves curled brown, covered in a fine layer of dust. I dropped my bag to the floor. My legs felt like they were weighed down with stones. I walked into the bedroom. The wardrobe on the left was still packed with my clothes, but the one on the right was empty. Hundreds of metal hangers clinked together, their sharp sounds cutting through the silence like a cruel joke. Clara was gone. I sat at the edge of the bed, leaning back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. I used to imagine this day differently, that she'd run into my arms, crying, whispering, "I'm sorry for not being there for you enough." But all that was left now was emptiness. On the table was the divorce paper she left behind, with a hastily scribbled note. "Don't look for me. I've chosen my own path." I clenched the paper, my hands trembling violently. But I didn't cry. There were no tears left in me. On the 10th day after coming back, I decided to clean the apartment. I knew if I let myself sit in that darkness for one more day, I might not get back up. I gathered the dirty clothes, took out the trash, wiped away layers of dust from the tables and chairs. When I opened the nightstand drawer, something fell to the floor. It was the silver bracelet I gave Clara on our 5th anniversary. The chain was broken, the surface scratched and dull. I picked it up, and a sharp pain shot through my chest. As I placed it back in the drawer, my eyes caught a folded piece of paper tucked in the back. It was a receipt from a luxury hotel, dated on the exact day Clara said she was on a business trip. The name printed clearly on the receipt, Michael Peterson. I froze. My head spun. That name wasn't unfamiliar. He was Clara's business partner, the one she had once dismissed, saying, "He's just a work colleague, don't overthink it." A chill ran down my spine. It felt like someone had wrapped their hand around my chest and was squeezing until I couldn't breathe. I let out a bitter laugh. So while I was in the hospital, fighting for my life, Clara and her work colleague were spending passionate nights in a hotel suite. I threw the receipt onto the table, then sank to the floor, my hands clutching my head. In the silence, the sound of hangers in the empty closet rattled faintly in the breeze, like fate itself was laughing at me. I used to think the cruelest thing in life was death, but now I know. The cruelest thing is having your heart crushed by the very person who once promised to hold it till the end. I don't remember how long I sat there on the cold floor. When I finally looked up, the sky outside had gone pitch black. The streetlights cast a dim glow through the window, stretching my shadow across the floor, distorted and alone. The days that followed, I lived like a ghost in my own apartment. I didn't cook, I didn't shower. I just sat silently on the sofa, staring at my phone as if waiting for a message from Clara, even though I knew it would never come. One night, My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. You shouldn't ruin Clara's new happiness. She deserves to be loved, something you could never give her. I read the message over and over, my hands trembling. A cold sweat slid down my spine. I called the number back. Busy signal. I tried again. This time, the phone was turned off. The next day, I stepped out of the apartment for the first time since I came back. I didn't know where I was going. My feet carried me to the coffee shop Clara used to love. Through the glass, I saw her. Clara was sitting across from a man, Michael Peterson. The soft yellow light fell on their table, highlighting the way their hands brushed lightly against each other's. Clara smiled. That smile. It used to be my whole world. Now it felt like a blade, cutting straight into my chest. I stood frozen. For a moment, I wanted to storm in, scream why, demand to know what she was thinking when she left me alone on the edge of life and death. But my legs wouldn't move. Michael reached out to wipe the corner of Clara's mouth. She laughed shyly, her eyes sparkling, eyes that once only looked at me that way. I turned and walked away, like a man sleepwalking. The cold wind slapped my face, stinging my eyes. That night, I sat in the dark apartment, holding the hotel receipt in my hand, staring at it. Was I that bad? Was I never enough for her? But another voice answered in my head, deeper, sharper. No, Daniel, you gave her everything, and she chose to betray you. I stood up, opened the closet, and pulled out an old box. Inside was our wedding album. I flipped through the photos, Clara beaming in her white dress, the way she looked at me with so much trust in her eyes. A photo slipped out. I bent down to pick it up. On the back, in Clara's familiar handwriting, it read, "You're my whole world. Don't ever leave me." My fingers trembled. My heart felt like it was being crushed in a fist. I set the photo on the table, staring at it one last time, then tore it in half. The pieces fluttered to the floor, scattering like dry leaves. The sound of paper ripping echoed through the empty apartment. In that moment, I realized I didn't love Clara anymore. I only loved the memory of the woman she used to be. But I knew, before I could let go completely, I had to look her in the eye, one last time. I don't know how long I stood there in front of the door. My hand rested on the handle, but I couldn't turn it. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let everything sink into silence forever. But another part wanted to look her in the eyes and ask why. In the end, I knocked. Footsteps echoed inside, then stopped. The door cracked open. Clara stood there, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. "Daniel, why are you here?" I stared at her for a long moment. She was wearing the dress I bought her for our 7th wedding anniversary. Her eyes flickered with panic. Her hand gripped the edge of the door tightly, as if afraid I might barge in. "I just want to hear it from your lips. Why?" My voice came out deep, so low I almost didn't recognize it. Clara lowered her head. Silence. The air felt heavy, broken only by the faint sound of wind sweeping through the hallway. I was tired of waiting for a man who was never there. I wanted a different life, a different man, someone who could stay with me. She looked up. Her eyes glistened with tears, but I didn't see remorse, only relief. "Michael?" I asked, though I didn't need an answer. Clara nodded slightly. A chill ran down my spine. I thought I'd feel rage, that I'd scream, that I'd want to smash everything. But standing there, I felt nothing, just emptiness. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her voice shaking. I looked into her eyes. For a brief second, I saw the old Clara, the girl who once said, "You're my whole world." But the image vanished, dissolving like smoke. "No," I sighed. "I don't love you enough to hate you anymore." Clara reached out and lightly touched my arm. A hesitant, fragile touch, like she was trying to grasp something long lost. I flinched, then stepped back. "You once promised you'd stay with me forever," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "And you once promised you'd never leave me," I replied, my voice steady. But neither of us kept our word. I turned and walked away. Behind me, Clara's sobs broke the silence. Daniel, I'm sorry. I didn't stop. The cold wind hit my face, but this time I could breathe easier than I had in years. That night, I sat on my balcony, staring at the city lights flickering in the distance. On the table lay the divorce papers Clara had left. I picked up a pen and signed my name. In that moment, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. I used to think losing Clara was the worst thing that could happen, but now I understand. Some losses come to remind us that letting go isn't failure. Sometimes, it's the beginning. Signing the divorce papers didn't bring the sense of relief I thought it would. Instead, a cold emptiness opened up inside me, like the last thing tethering me to this life had just vanished. That night, I sat out on the balcony. The November wind burned against my face. Down below, the streets glowed with lights. People moved hurriedly, and I found myself wondering, are they going home to someone waiting for them? Or are they returning to an empty room, like I am? The apartment was so quiet it felt suffocating. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each sound like it was counting down to the moment my heart would stop beating. I dragged myself into the bedroom and opened the closet. The left side was still full of shirts I used to wear to construction sites and old jeans with frayed hems. The right side, empty. Dozens of metal hangers clinked together, the sound cold and mocking. I reached out and touched one of the hangers. The metal felt icy, numbing my fingers. That space used to hold Clara's favorite dresses, her pastel nightgowns carrying a faint scent of perfume. Now, only a void remained. I sank to the floor, my back against the closet door. A memory flashed in my mind. A winter night. Clara stood in the kitchen, wrapped in a scarf, steam rising from a pot of soup. She smiled brightly when she saw me and said, "You're home. My hands are covered in flour. Can you wrap my scarf one more time for me?" I once had a home, but now it existed only in my memory. The next morning, I went to the hospital for a checkup. The doctor said the results were good. The tumor was responding well to treatment. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, I still felt hollow. On my way home, I stopped at a small park near the apartment. The late autumn breeze carried the earthy scent of dry leaves. Children ran around laughing. An old man sat on a bench, hands trembling as he turned the pages of a book. Nearby, a pregnant woman watched her little boy on a swing, her eyes soft with love. I stood there, my hands deep in my coat pockets. My throat tightened. A question echoed in my mind. Do I still have a chance to start over? Or is it already too late? When I got back to the apartment, I threw open the windows, letting the sunlight flood the stuffy room. Tiny dust particles floated in the air, sparkling like ashes in the light. I picked up my phone and scrolled through old photos. Clara, smiling, holding the little cat I once gave her. Another photo, our wedding day. Her white dress, the way she looked at me like I was her entire world. My finger hovered over the delete button. A message popped up. "Are you sure you want to delete?" I froze. My hand trembled. In those few seconds, memories came rushing back like a waterfall. Sleepless nights together. Her arms around me after long, exhausting days. Promises we never kept. I took a deep breath and pressed delete. Hundreds of photos disappeared in an instant, leaving behind a blank screen and an icy emptiness in my chest. The phone vibrated. A new message appeared, from Clara's number. "Daniel, can I see you one last time? Just once." My heart clenched. The screen blurred as my eyes stung with tears. Clara's message still glowed on the screen. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I need to see you one last time to say this." I set the phone down on the table, but then picked it up again, put it down, picked it up. Inside me, two voices battled. Go. Hear her out one last time. End it for good. Don't go. Don't torture yourself anymore. I shot up, pacing back and forth in the dark apartment. Each footstep echoed through the empty space, heavy like hammers pounding against my skull. I sank into the sofa, burying my face in my hands. In the darkness, Clara's face appeared again, her tearful eyes whispering, You're my whole world. And then, her bright smile as Michael's hand brushed gently against hers. For a moment, I asked myself, if I see her now, what will I do? Will I forgive her? Or will I unleash words so bitter I'll regret them for the rest of my life? I stepped out onto the balcony. The cold night wind slapped my face, making my eyes sting. Down on the street, people hurried past, unaware that high above them, a man was wrestling with his own heart. The next morning, my phone rang. An unknown number. Daniel, it's me. That voice, sweet but trembling. Can I see you? Please, I just need 10 minutes. After that, I'll leave, and you'll never have to see me again. I said nothing. Something lodged in my throat. I could hear her breathing heavily, as if holding back tears. Please, Daniel. I'm sorry. I need to say this, or it'll haunt me for the rest of my life. I tilted my head back, staring at the ceiling. The pale morning light seeped through the curtains, casting a faint golden hue across the room. Everything around me felt empty, but inside, a storm raged. I nodded slightly, knowing she couldn't see it. Fine. This afternoon. The park near my place. Thank you. Thank you. Clara's voice cracked as she spoke. The call ended. I set the phone down, staring at the black screen. Part of me screamed, "Don't go. Don't let her hurt you again." But another voice whispered softly, "Go. Let her say what she needs to say. End this chapter." That afternoon, I stood in the park, hands buried deep in my coat pockets. The late autumn wind carried the scent of dry leaves, its chill slipping through every seam of my jacket. From a distance, I saw Clara approaching. She looked thinner than the last time I saw her. Her beige coat clung to her fragile frame. Dark circles framed her eyes, yet there was still a flicker of something familiar. That softness I had once loved so desperately. Clara stopped a few steps away. Our eyes met. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling. I gave a faint nod. No words. Silence settled over us. The sound of dry leaves crunching underfoot whispered like echoes from the past. Clara took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine. I'm pregnant. My chest tightened like it was caught in a vice. Everything around me blurred. Clara stood there, her eyes red and swollen, hands clutching the edges of her coat. The late autumn wind weaved through the trees, tossing her hair into disarray. I saw a woman worn down, so different from the radiant Clara I once knew. I'm pregnant." Her voice cracked, snapping like a string pulled too tight. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to ask right away, Is it mine? But the words caught in my throat. I couldn't speak. Clara drew in a deep breath, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Daniel, I'm not sure whose baby it is. I'm sorry." The words pierced through me like a blade. I could hear the wind whistling past my ears, the blood pounding in my head, but everything around me blurred into nothingness. I turned away, staring out at the lake. Its surface was still and glassy, reflecting the gray, heavy sky above. In it, I saw the reflection of a man. His shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. "Do you hate me?" Clara's voice wavered. I stayed silent for a long time. 100 words burned in my chest. I wanted to blame her. I wanted to scream, to demand why. I wanted to tell her about the lonely nights in the hospital, when I was fighting for my life, and she was with someone else. But all those words faded away. "No," I exhaled, my voice so deep I barely recognized it. "I don't hate you. I'm just tired." Clara trembled. She took a small step toward me, but stopped. "Daniel, I'm sorry. If I could go back, I swear I'd do everything differently. But we can't go back, Clara." I looked straight into her eyes. "You used to be my whole world, but now I see I can't love you anymore. Not because you betrayed me, but because I'm no longer the man who loved you back then." Clara covered her face, sobbing. Her broken cries echoed through the stillness of the park. A small child ran past us, his laughter ringing out, so bright, so alive, cutting through the heavy silence. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. In that moment, I understood. Love doesn't die in a single day. It dies slowly, through small cracks, unsaid words, and distances that grow too wide to cross. Clara stepped closer, her hand resting lightly on my arm. Her touch sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Can you forgive me?" she whispered. I looked down at my own hands, hands that once held hers through all those years, hands that trembled as I slipped a wedding ring on her finger. Now they only felt cold. "Forgive you?" I let out a faint, broken laugh. "I don't love you enough to hate you, and I don't need to forgive you. Because it's over." I pulled my arm free from her grasp. Her eyes shattered like glass. I turned and began to walk away. Behind me, her voice cracked, calling out, "Daniel, if you leave now, you'll never see me again." I paused. The cold wind swept past, leaves crunching beneath my feet. "Maybe. That's the best thing for both of us," I whispered, and I kept walking. I walked out of the park without looking back. Behind me, I heard Clara's footsteps falter, then stop. In the wind, her muffled sobs mingled with the rustling leaves underfoot. I kept walking, each step heavy as if stones were piled on my chest. "I'm pregnant." Her words echoed in my mind like a curse. I didn't know if the baby was mine. And maybe I didn't have the courage to find out. That night, I lay sprawled on the floor of my apartment, staring blankly at the ceiling. My heart pounded, each beat slow, heavy. In the darkness, memories came flooding back. Me on one knee, sliding a ring onto Clara's finger in a small room lit with candles. She cried and nodded. Me holding her close after the diagnosis, her whispering, "You have to live. I need you." And then, Clara sitting in a cafe, her eyes sparkling as Michael gently wiped the corner of her lips. A sharp pain clenched my chest. I buried my face in a pillow, trying to stifle the sobs. But the tears came anyway, hot, unrelenting. Who am I, if not Clara's husband? That question cut deep, twisting like a knife. I once believed I'd crumble if I lost her. But here, in this darkness, I realized no one has the right to define my life, except me. The next morning, I woke early. Pale winter sunlight streamed through the window, soft, faint, yet strangely warm. I opened my laptop and wrote a leave request, determined to finish my treatment once and for all. For the first time in months, I made myself a cup of coffee, and I added sugar, something Clara always hated. I stood before the mirror, staring at a man with sunken eyes and a gaunt face. But for the first time, I didn't feel disgusted by the reflection. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mr. Daniel, I'm Clara's doctor. I know I shouldn't do this, but..." Clara was just admitted after losing a lot of blood while trying to keep the baby. She asked me to tell you, "I'm sorry. I don't want you to regret anything." My chest tightened. I stared at the screen, my mind spinning with 100 questions. I grabbed my car keys, my hands trembling. Should I go? Or let her face the consequences of her choices? Part of me screamed, "Don't go back. You've already let go." But another voice whispered softly, "Go, not for her. Go for the man you want to be." I drew in a deep breath, gripping the keys tighter. I opened the door. A rush of cold air swept in. Outside, the city lights flickered faintly. I stepped out, leaving behind the empty apartment and the memories that once burned through my heart. I drove through the night, toward the hospital. Streetlights stretched like scattered scars across the dark, empty road. A fine drizzle blurred the windshield, turning everything ahead into a faded painting. In my head, the doctor's words kept replaying, "Clara is losing blood fast. She keeps calling your name." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Part of me wanted to turn the car around, to let her face the consequences of her choices. But another part, the weaker part, the one that had once loved her to the point of breaking, screamed, "Go, even if it's only to say goodbye." I reached the hospital just before 2 a.m. The hallway stretched endlessly, bathed in cold white neon light, amplifying the chill in the air. At the far end of the corridor, I saw Michael. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw me, he froze for a moment, then stepped forward. "Daniel?" His voice was hoarse. "Thank you for coming." I said nothing. I stared straight into his eyes. In them, I saw fear, regret, and a love for Clara I couldn't deny. "She keeps mentioning your name." Michael's voice cracked. "I know I was wrong to step between you two, but please, save her." His words hit me like a punch to the chest. I turned my head, not wanting him to see the tears welling up in my eyes. Save her? What's left for me to save? A young nurse approached and bowed slightly. "Mr. Daniel, the doctor is calling you in. Clara wants to see you alone." My heart clenched. I stood there for a long moment, taking in a deep breath before I stepped into the room. Clara lay there, her skin pale as wax. A faint smile tugged at her lips. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but when she saw me, they lit up with a strange, fragile glow. "Daniel." Her voice was so faint, I had to lean close to hear her. "I'm here," I whispered, my throat tight. "I'm sorry. For everything." A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I hurt you. I destroyed everything we had, but I never stopped loving you." A sharp pain pierced my chest. I gently squeezed her cold, frail hand. "Don't say anything more," I murmured. "Save your strength." Clara shook her head weakly. "The baby, Daniel. If it's yours, I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. If it's not, I'm sorry for causing you so much pain. But please don't hate me. Live. Find happiness again." My throat tightened. Hot tears streamed down my face. In that moment, I realized I no longer cared whose child it was. I no longer cared about the betrayals, the lies. I held her hand tightly and whispered in her ear, "I forgive you. And I forgive myself too." Clara's eyes shimmered, a single tear falling, catching the dim light like a tiny crystal. Clara gripped my hand tightly, her eyes weak but still flickering with a faint, fragile hope. "Daniel, if there's a next life, I hope I'll find you again. And this time, I'll love you the right way." My chest tightened. All the anger, pain, and torment of these past months dissolved in that moment, as if they had never existed. "Don't say another word," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You need to rest." Clara smiled, a faint, delicate smile, yet so beautiful, like she had finally let go of all her burdens. Then a long, piercing beep filled the room. On the heart monitor, the steady line turned into one endless flat line. "Clara!" I screamed, my heart twisting like it was being crushed in a vice. Doctors and nurses rushed into the room. I was pushed out as the door slammed shut in front of me. I stood there, my back against the cold wall, my fists clenched so tightly my palms bled. All I could see in my mind was Clara's eyes before they closed, eyes so gentle it broke me all over again. Michael stepped up beside me, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry," he murmured, his own eyes red. "She loved you, more than I ever realized." I didn't reply. My gaze was locked on the closed door of her hospital room. Moments later, the doctor came out, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "I'm so sorry. Clara didn't make it." Time froze. Every sound around me faded into a distant, muffled haze. I walked back into the room, my steps slow, heavy. Clara lay there, her face serene as if she were only sleeping. I sat down beside her and gently held her cold hand. "I forgive you. Truly forgive you," I whispered, tears sliding down my cheeks. "And I forgive myself for letting us lose each other." I left the hospital as dawn broke, pale sunlight cutting through the misty streets. I tilted my face toward the gray sky and took in a long, deep breath. Clara is no longer here, but she loved me, and I loved her. That's all that remains, and it's enough for me to keep going. Back at my apartment, a small plant Clara once brought still sat on the table, its tender green leaves stretching toward the light. I reached out and touched it gently, the coolness of life brushing against my fingertips. Maybe loss isn't the end. Maybe it's a reminder to live better for the rest of this life. It's been 2 months since that day. Each morning, I wake up in my small apartment. Sunlight filters through the blinds, painting the floor with a soft golden hue. Everything feels familiar. The old wooden table, the bookshelf lined with half-read novels, the little plant Clara once brought over. But something inside me has changed. I step out onto the balcony, a warm cup of coffee in hand. The steam curls in the cold air, mixing with the faint sound of birds in the early winter. I watch the people below, strangers rushing to and fro. The day Clara died, I thought I'd fall apart. I stood there in that cold hospital room, staring at her motionless body, like a breeze that had passed and vanished. That was when I realized a bitter truth. Loving someone doesn't mean you get to keep them forever. For nights afterward, I lay awake, replaying everything. The early days of our love, the moment I proposed in that tiny kitchen, the arguments, the silences, and the betrayal that tore my heart open. At times, I asked myself, if I had loved her better, would it have changed anything? But then another voice answered, she could have chosen differently too, but she didn't. We both made mistakes, and in the end, we both lost. Yesterday, I went to the cemetery. The sky was overcast, the wind biting cold. I stood before Clara's grave for a long time, laying down a bouquet of hydrangeas, her favorite flowers. I stared at her name, carved into stone, and whispered, I'm not angry at you anymore, and I'm no longer angry at myself for not being able to hold on. Our love, it was beautiful in its own way, but it had cracks. Now, it's just a memory. A tear slipped down my cheek, but this time, it didn't feel suffocating. When I got home, I opened an old journal. Inside were words I'd written during those lonely, pain-filled months. Live for her, even if she's no longer here. Forgive, because only then will your heart stop bleeding. Love yourself, because no one else can do it for you. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Daniel's new apartment came alive, bright, neat, full of light. On the table sat a photo of Daniel smiling alongside new friends. He had started painting, playing guitar, going on weekend runs. That night, in a dream, I saw Clara. She wore a simple white dress, her hair falling softly to her shoulders. She smiled gently. Are you okay? She asked, her voice as soft as a breeze. I nodded. I'm okay now. Thank you. For everything. Clara turned, her small figure fading into the glowing sunlight. I stood on the balcony, eyes closed, feeling the cool wind brush past. Some scars will always remain, reminding us that we once loved, once lost, once hurt so deeply it nearly broke us. But scars also remind us we're still alive, and we still deserve to be happy.